So very briefly, I would like to thank all the sponsors that make the event happening today, and we are also proud to be one of them, obviously. There's also a code of conduct which we like to point out to. There's also a QR code, so if you would like to know more about it, you can scan it and read a bit more about that. So back to our session. So what we are doing is we try to help organizations become digital fit, and it's a crucial aspect for us to transform, to adopt, and to continuously improve their way of working, taking into account the needs, the individual, and the organizational maturity, because it also has an impact on the pace of the adoption track. A very important piece of the puzzle is the well-being of the individual and the teams within the organization. But let's start at the beginning first. So why are organizations doing what they do today? Why are organizations investing in a modern digital workplace, and what are their motivations?
Yeah, good question, Peter. Often we see there are technology drivers playing. However, more and more we see that business departments are becoming involved and even becoming the main drivers of these type of tracks. Because business leaders, they want to transform their teams, their organization in a modern working environment where people can work from anywhere, anytime, and be equally as productive. That was already going on pre-COVID, so that was already a trend before that. But we definitely see an increase speed up in the last couple of months. So the need is higher than ever because there's basically no other choice today.
Yes, yeah, indeed. In 2020, I think we all saw the huge increase in the business involvement in these types of tracks because the need was exquisite. There is a tremendous impact in the daily work of people, in the way they are behaving and the impact it has on themselves. So it is a change that was coming very fast. We were a bit overwhelmed, but now it's coming even faster than ever.
Yes, you're absolutely right. So the consequence is that not everybody can follow. Not everybody has the same digital maturity, what we call it. We now have 4 generations in the workforce, which indicates there are different expectations or even different cultural differences. Between those different generations. So many people still follow. Or can still follow with the basics, but let's say they can set up a meeting online, especially now with COVID. That a lot of people learn that now. They can chat with one another. They can work online in documents and share information, things like that. But of course, there's a lot more to modern and digital working than just that. That is basically just the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah, I hear you talking about many people, but how can we make sure that everyone is on board and make sure that the people are aware of all of these changes and possibilities? So how do we make sure that the knowledge is there and how to reinforce the usage?
Well, I think the most straightforward answer today to that is change management and user adoption. Why? Because it's a people-centered process to engage your people and to achieve your business outcomes. So during the process, defining the business outcomes is one of the most tricky parts we see today. Of course, we need to know what these outcomes are and how to live up to them. On top of that, they also need to be smart and measurable.
Well, yeah, I know what you mean. So the goal is that the business benefits are transformed or positioned in such a manner that they become measurable. And today, the desired business outcomes are typically captured in the form of KPIs, and are just a couple of them on the slides as an inspiration. And most of them will probably they will feel familiar for most of you. So some KPIs are easily measured within the current possibilities of the tools, or sometimes with additional layers on top of the standard tools. So you might even have some of the standard usage analytics reports present in Power BI. And basically, besides clear statistics in regards to the product usage and assigned licenses and such, we also tend to see the first adoption-related metrics showing up. And it might be clear for everyone, I think, that user adoption and the measurement of the impact it has on the organization is crucial in the change process. And this is really important. So when speaking of implementing a new way of work, the risk of failure of technology is only 10%. so compared to a 90% risk of user adoption. Also keep in mind that most people know that they are in need of a new way of work, and they feel it's a bit old, robust, so they know there are new things that need to happen, but they often don't know what that basically means. And I like to quote Henry Ford on this matter. So he said, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. So even if you had give them a race car, for example, people would have still resisted at first. So basically, technology is the means, but it's not the goal itself. So to make sure everyone is on board as much as possible, there are different methods to be used.
Yes, you're absolutely right, Peter. The most used methodology, let's say, today for change management and user adoption is the ATKAR model. This model offers everything to prepare, enable, and engage the people for the upcoming change. For those of you who are not quite familiar what this means, let me give a very short explanation of this model. So the model is basically built in logical different phases. At each phase, there's a set of actions, let's say, that you can take. So the A of awareness is to make people aware of the changes that is coming and explain them clearly why this change is relevant for them. So what is in it for them, basically. The D stands for desire. So there is a desire from the side of the people that needs to be created within the organization for the change. A network of change ambassadors, of course, needs to be built, which will function as your antennas inside the organization to get feedback and manage potential resistance that is coming from the workforce, let's say. Then knowledge, of course, to handle the change, people need to have the right set of knowledge and the right set of skills. If people do not know how to use the new tools, chances are pretty high they will not use them at all. So there's a focus on training there, coaching and communication via different channels in such a way it works for the organization you're dealing with, basically. So every organization has its different flavors or its different habits. So definitely adjust it to that. The A stands for ability. So run multiple pilots in a controllable and smaller group of people before launching it to the entire organization. This gives you the ability to monitor, adjust, and iterate until the process really works and fulfills the expectation. And then the R stands for reinforcement. So once people start using the tool, the job is not done. After the change has been delivered, do not let go. We often see that, but it requires basically a continuous effort. Keep actively monitoring and adjusting where needed, for example, by offering small tips and tricks about new functionalities or new ways of working, run additional campaigns, service, and so on. So to summarize, if the change is not clear for people, so why does the change need to happen? Why do we need a set of new tools? Why do we need to change our working behavior? What is in it for me? So as a user, what is in it for the user? And if they do not know how to use the tools, chances are pretty big they will completely use the tools wrong or not use them at all. So one of the key success factors in such a track is having the correct people on the floor. I talked about the change ambassadors. Those are basically the people who are close to the people on the floor. And if they have an influential nature, let's say, they will have a much bigger impact on the success of the adoption.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. So if we have a look at how ambassadorship today is happening, so ambassadorship itself is often assigned through a number of managers trying to create an ambassador network to cover the entire organization. So in theory, this sounds like a very smart decision. And if we find the ambassadors that are also actually willing to take up the task, well, that's a plus, right? So enthusiastic ambassadors are indeed a gem, and it's not. You don't find them very often, but if you do, please embrace it. But we ask ourselves: is it sufficient? So are we absolutely sure that enthusiastic people have a strong organizational connection and an impact on their surroundings? So But okay, for now, let's just assume that we have a great network of ambassadors. How do we get their insights in terms of user adoption? How to avoid the change team and business leaders are running blind? So of course we could question them once in a while, for sure. And we all know how much people love to fill in surveys. And again, let's assume they do, and they fill in these surveys on periodic basis. Even then, we have to assume that they have been filled in correctly, that they talk, so the ambassadors, they talk or collaborate enough with their colleagues, their peers, to provide us with great insights. So I hope you all get the picture here. So I use the word assume a lot. So this approach is based on assumptions on top of other assumptions. So there are just way too many of them in this approach to create a clear state of adoption image. And I hear some of you thinking, but we can measure how much the tools are being used. And that is absolutely correct. And it's really important too, because simply put, it's data.
Yes, indeed. So one might say that an accurate measurement is worth more than 1,000 expert opinions. So measurement today can be done in different ways. So the one you just mentioned, it's basically called active data processing. So it's conducted through surveys, like you just explained, Peter. And however, yeah, the quantity there, the quality, I mean, sorry, the quality really depends on the results of the survey, the amount of people who are answering the survey. That is really key in there, like you also mentioned. Now, luckily, organizations also have a bunch of data already, which is people related. Very often, that data resides in the HR department. That data can give us strong insight and structure and relationship between the people within the organization and between the people and the relationship with the organization. Also demographical or even cultural information. So that's definitely an additional one. There is also a more passive form of data gathering and analysis. I know, Peter, you have a BI background. I think you definitely have something interesting to say about that.
Yes, absolutely. So, like you said, today we have a number of passive data insights based on measurements of our Microsoft 365 environment. The well-known usage reports in the Microsoft 365 admin portal, for example. As briefly mentioned before, more in-depth metrics can currently be found in Power BI. So there we have a regularly updated data set at our disposal, covered within the Microsoft 365 Usage Analytics app. They should really shorten that name. We see how many teams have been created recently, how many app-based licenses have been assigned, even metrics on, for example, month-on-month returning users. But even if we take a step back, considering all of these metrics, even with smart custom reports and additional insights, do they provide us real insights on behavioral changes?
I would say yes and no. I'd like to add, if I can, a few questions to this. So does this type of data gathering offer us a better view on how the tools are actually being used? Can we clearly see how these tools provide a better, more modern workplace? Or if our employees even benefit from this new way of working? Do they have more meetings, but shorter meetings? Or do they have less meetings, but maybe longer meetings? Do they have a lot of one-to-one calls or more meetings with more than, let's say, 8 people? Today, that's really hard to know. Especially in the current remote context with COVID, it becomes even more tricky to know how people are behaving and how well they are doing, basically. For instance, are they running a lot of overtime? Do they have sufficient time to focus on their core activities and so on? So this requires, let's say, a different type of measuring. To gain these insights, there are other metrics which have a potential business value, like productivity and employee well-being. But they are very tricky to measure in a classical way. Therefore, today impressions through surveys and often gut feeling drive the insights. So by introducing new work styles and collaboration tools, you don't have a guarantee that people are using these tools in an effective way. I mean, in a way that provides them focus, more focus and not less focus, in a way that they truly run meetings efficiently, not more meetings, and so on.
Mm-hmm. Yes, no, absolutely. I follow you on that. So this is just what we did. So we looked at the facts. We talked to many of our clients, and we questioned our own approach. So sometimes you get to do that. Today we really dare to ask ourselves, do we currently achieve our true goal? And the answer is partially, but there is so much room for improvement. We needed a better whole, a more reliable user adoption approach, which is measurable, that provides insights in digital maturity differences, a way to continuously improve this so-called new way of work. And yes, we found it. So we call it digital fit. Benny, can you please tell us more about it?
Yes, for sure. So the philosophy is about getting people and organizations digitally fit, like the word explains, and keep it that way. Lots of organizations today are struggling with the constant and fast releases of new technological possibilities. This, of course, has an impact on their people. And this is not always clear what benefits these new possibilities in technological advances can offer them. So digital fit is all about the continuous improvement of daily work with the support of technology, basically. Um, the digital maturity, which you see at the bottom here, is let's say the base for this approach, or the base metric for this approach. So the digital maturity of both the organization and the employees is at the core. Let me give you some typical examples. So we encounter people in trainings who are literally not able to find an application on their desktop if it's at another location, if the icon is not there where they're used to having it. You also have a lot of people, of course, who are used to working their entire career in email and file shares, and let's say in a more classical way. If you give those people one or two online trainings about, for instance, co-authoring and sharing information in Teams, chances are very high that they will be lost in less than 2 minutes, regardless of the quality of the training. Why is that? Because the gap is simply too big between what they are doing today, how they are used to working for years and years, and what is expected of them in a modern way of working. So those type of people need a far more intense training track than, let's say, a more digital savvy person in that same organization. That is, of course, also true the other way around. A digital savvy person will be bored out of his or her mind in a slow and too intense training. Give that person some short introduction videos, some online material, and that person will be working with it in no time in a proper way. Another example, and it's more on the organization side, is where many processes are email driven, typically in the lower digital mature environments. For instance, onboarding of a new employee, where an HR person needs to send information to multiple departments, and everybody needs to perform a set of tasks that are depending on one another. This often results in a lack of overview, a less fluent user experience for the new employee, which is, of course, crucial. A first impression is always an important one. Everybody knows that, and there's many other examples like that. So the digital maturity of people goes hand in hand with the maturity of the organization. A digital mature organization requires, of course, digital mature people in the organization. So it is good to get the broad maturity of the organization up to speed and to a level where they're able to properly perform the basic activities in the digital workplace. I already named some examples. Like properly setting up and managing online meetings, being able to perform the basic collaborative tasks with colleagues, like working online in documents, structuring them, sharing them, etc. Using teams according to a proper defined governance model in the organization, etc. That is, of course, just a starting point. So the next and better step requires an increased maturity of people on the one hand, and at the same time, it increases the maturity of the organization. So during this step, we combine multiple applications to improve the work stream. This can be applications within the Microsoft 365 landscape, but this can also be a combination with Microsoft 365 apps and other tools. That can be Salesforce or whatever. Doesn't really matter. In both cases, Microsoft Teams is at the center of this. So Microsoft Teams is classically being positioned as the hub of teamwork. This is now changing more in the hub of work, we call it. Then the final and best step is to automate and optimize business use cases and processes with low or no code solutions. And eventually, learning business users, of course, not all of them, but a particular set of people, to create their own business applications and automate their own processes. So moving up the ladder requires, of course, time, proper coaching at the pace of the organization, the teams inside the organizations, and the individuals inside the teams. To make organizations digitally fit, we also created a digitally fit methodology. So our digital fit methodology is built on top of the ATKAR model, which I explained earlier, and consists of the following stages. So discovery, these tracks usually start with, let's say, the discovery of the organization. We need to get to know the organization. Every organization is different, and it has its own culture and habits. While doing that, we determine clear goals and benefits the change will bring. This why are they doing this? What will be the clear benefits for the people and the organization? It is, of course, crucial to focus on leadership engagement. So getting them on board early is very crucial in such a track. And we do other sorts of activities during that step, like determining the change approach, depending, for example, on what worked in the past, what didn't work, and so on. Next, an alignment is needed on the needs of the organization and the individuals. In order to do that, we need to gain deep insights in the workforce. So using data analysis where needed, create a multi-skilled change team, determine a change ambassador network, also preferably with data underneath it. We come to that later. We built a change communication and training plan and so forth. So let's say the stuff that you do in the ATKAR approach during the engagement, which is then the next step. There is where the true connection starts with the people or with the workforce of the organization, by building their knowledge, testing and adjusting the process during pilots, delivering the solutions to the masses, and so on. Of course, during that step, data insights are extra useful to adjust and coach where needed. With the peer support, of course, that the ambassador network is offering to the people. In the last step, we gain insights in the behavior of people and teams to further reinforce and improve the way that they are working. The productivity and the well-being is at the heart of that. So the productivity of the employees and their well-being related to that is at the heart of this. This is a continuous story, so this is not a one-time thing. This is a continuous improvement of new or existing business use cases and processes. So to summarize this, doing all this, we are using the data that Microsoft 365 is generating. So it generates a bunch of useful information and data to gain insights in the behavioral patterns of people and their work style. That allows us to professionalize our user adoption approach and to improve, in the end, the productivity and well-being of employees. So that's it in a nutshell.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So now it becomes really cool. So now we get to the cool part of the presentation. So we're almost there. So with our data-driven approach, we are now able to analyze Microsoft 365 generated data, enriched if needed, like Benny said, with additional data sources from, for example, HR or active survey data, to gain an objective insight into determining the best possible influencers as a change agent. We can visualize the real communities. I get to that on the next slide, where we also get to see the true information streams and collaboration patterns. We now know who the key people are, regardless of org charts or managers that decide which are the key people. We can detect also who is being left out or who we are about to lose. We can analyze real relations between business units, departments, teams, and externals even. And for example, we can measure the behavioral change from mail to Teams usage. So to determine or reinforce the ambassador network, this data can be used to detect just a limited set of people to reach a maximum amount of people with. So in this picture on the right, you get to see that each dot is considered a node. It's just a terminology. It's a person. A node is a person. So based on advanced scientific queries, we were able to identify the green nodes. And these are the people which are considered actual influencers within the organization. The underlying data is built on top of metadata, which was extracted from historic email traffic, calendars, and even Microsoft Teams conversations. And like we've mentioned before, the ambassador network is key in any change track. So the detection of the correct people who have a substantial influence on their peers, this is crucial for the success of the entire track. Now, when we ask organizations for an overview of their active communities, they often point to, for example, a community tool that they currently have in place. Could be Yammer, could be all sorts, maybe non-Microsoft technology, that's possible. Also, sometimes they point to groups of people with the same function title or a role, and they call it the so-called expert network. This seems to be accurate in theory. So based on data, we are now able to see the real communities by gaining insights in who is connected with who and how communities are actually behaving, which people are driving them, and how they are connected to each other, both internally and externally. And on top of that, based on comparison of periodic data sets, such as these, we can detect transitions in behavior when introducing new changes.
Yes, indeed we can. Productivity, that's then let's say the second track in the data driven approach is at the core of a well-oiled organization, let's say. And employee well-being is directly related to this, because inefficiency leads to working overtime, increasing workloads, related stress situations, and so on. So productivity and well-being, this is basically about measuring your team productivity, make meetings productive and cut the waste, quantify and estimate costs related to those inefficiencies, let's say, measure their home office performance, very relevant in these days, check if people have sufficient time to perform their actual work, and so on. So let's dive in to this topic. It usually starts with getting a high-level overviews of overall insights in the meeting culture and behavior of an organization. With dashboards like you see here on the screen, we contain, let's say, a summarized overview of relevant data, and also trends in the form of the graphs, like you see an example here. Note that these dashboards allow you to filter on time, department, team, or whatever form of people structure. So it can also be location-based or anything else. That's completely, let's say, configurable. The data is gathered, like we already explained, directly from Microsoft 365, and it can be enriched with additional data. So for instance, to create your department and teams, we all know that not every organization has the most clean Active Directory structure. No problem, that this data can also be enriched with, for example, lists or exports from HR related data. So that's not an issue there. To zoom in a little bit on one of the metrics, meetings, for instance, with more than 8 people tend to be more positioned as briefings. It's actually hard to have a close engagement with all the members at the same time when you have 8 people or more. If a team is having these type of meetings too frequent and the duration of those meetings is too long, that could be a potential alarm bell. Based on that, you can take action and coach them, and etc. Another one is multitasking. So where the portion of emails that are being sent during meetings. So if a person has a meeting and at the same time the person is sending emails, that also tells us something. So that gives us an indication about the quality of the meetings. How well are they prepared? The people in there who are not focused, could indicate that they may be not required in that meeting, or that the topics are not of their interest, that the meeting is maybe too long, and it should be better cut up in subtopics and so on. So this can be used to gain insights in the behavior and leverage a cultural change, basically. Now, there are other forms of distractions. So mailing during a meeting is a form of distraction, let's say. So it's not only sending emails and meetings, like I just explained, but the meetings themselves can also be distracting. If you have a lot of work to do and people constantly invite you in meetings, then you do not get a lot of stuff done, of course. So then we call a meeting as well a distraction. Also, emails themselves can be a distraction, or chat generated by Teams can be distracting as well. One of the core aspects of employee well-being, that's then more the second topic, is how much time do they have left to actually perform their work? In other words, how much focus time do people actually have? We hear a lot of people saying during COVID, everybody just fills up my agenda. I don't have any time left to, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I basically need to start my workday to get everything done. And yeah, there's also, of course, a cost element to that. If people spend their whole day in meetings, their work doesn't get done. So there's also an estimation of costs related to this that can be managed via our tooling. Notice that this is a different visualization. So this is in the form of a socio map or a heat map. This offers a very direct indication of which teams are performing well, and which teams require additional action or additional coaching. Like we already mentioned, it's hard, specifically in these days with the social distancing and with the remote working, to gain a proper insight in the working rhythm of people and the potential consequences as well. So this again allows us to take action from the well-being of people. So what this shows us is an overview of people working outside their what can be defined as the working hours, let's say. So this gives business leaders an overview, and this gives also an overview across the organization of what is going on that level. So so these type of data insights can be used during the digital fit track to gain live insights. So it's done with passive data connection, so we can get a live insight in the behavior of teams. This allows us to work very targeted and very accurate, and allows us to guide and coach the right teams at the right time with the proper information, let's say. Basically, any metric can be created, which is based on email data, calendar, Teams, or basically any other collaboration tool, not to name the other ones. Data in combination can also be combined or enriched, like I explained before, with, for instance, HR data. So that is definitely, let's say, a summary of what can be done with this. Now, I hear you all thinking, that is all very interesting, but what about data privacy? We live inside Europe, so GDPR is something to take into account. You're absolutely right to think that. So you could see this as, let's say, a potential pitfall for doing this type of activity, but everything is in place, everything is there to perform this in a perfectly GDPR compliant manner. First of all, there is no use of actual content. So we never analyze, for instance, mail subjects, content of documents, contents of chats, etc. Or any content whatsoever that the user created, let's say. So we use metadata, in other words. All tools that we use in terms of this are GDPR compliant. They are inside the European Union. They have all the policies and compliancy rules or legislation that is required to use them, also in enterprise context. And also the data can be anonymized, and we do that as much as we can where possible. It of course depends on the requirements of the organization, what they want to analyze. So basically, it comes down to determine the goal of what you want to accomplish with these type of analysis. That needs to be crystal clear. It needs to be determined and described upfront. And it needs to be discussed and also approved with, let's say, the required parties, DPO, legal, HR, etc.
Okay. Whoa, that was quite a lot of information, I can imagine, for many of you, or maybe most of you. So I think we can conclude or try to conclude on how to become digital fit using data. So first of all, very crucial, adoption. Adoption is key. Make sure to properly discover the organization first, its culture and its habits, determine clear goals, and align the approach and engage users with a strong team and the best possible influencers.
Mm-hmm. Then also combine your different data sources. Like we explained, you have still your survey data, you have your HR data, maybe different types of data, and then you have your behavioral data, which we call it, and move beyond the standard KPIs that were more static, let's say, and build a much greater value.
Yes, and then maybe the third most important thing to remember or to take home with you. Okay, that was maybe a strange statement in COVID period. So to focus on continuously reinforcing business use cases, productivity, and also the well-being of employees. Or in a nutshell, we like to ask to please do take a data-driven approach to empower your employees. Thank you very much. Ben, you got some final words for the attendees? I think I'm going to wave at Albert because
Is it better?
You're muted. Yes, yes.
I was still mute. Sorry about that. So
That's
thanks
okay.
for the session. Really, really awesome. Learned a lot of cool new things. So that's good from my side. There was one question from Ingrid. Are those metrics conform data protection? I think you already answered that question in the last part of the presentation, but just head over to the Discord channel, see if Ingrid has any other remarks or needs some more clarification, so that at least helped out. And other than that, we're going to have a 15-minute break, and then we'll move on to the next session talking about search. Thank you very much.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
The Omita framework is an enterprise-ready software platform that makes it possible to set up an easy integration between your existing back-office applications and push all the relevant information into digital workplaces. Omita has developed various kinds of solutions which can be easily deployed and linked to your back-office applications. Omita has solutions for contract management, HR to speed up onboarding and offboarding processes, sales dashboards, shop floor portals, and many more. If you want more information, visit our website.